Hi.
Yo, what's up, dude?
I should have hit the record button like 20 seconds earlier. You were you were making some
I
sounds
was
that were kind of weird.
expressing my love for you.
Mm.
Expressing my love for you, my friend. Because you know what? I consider
What?
myself generous with my love.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
right.
Yep.
Hey, we're recording this the week of Halloween.
Hmm.
I'm kind of Halloween hasn't happened yet,
Okay.
but I'm kind of curious, like, do you get Halloween? Do you understand Halloween? Like, what are we celebrating? One and two, I'm already like over it. I'm kind of annoyed by Halloween. There's like tons of Halloween parties that started like in the middle of October. There's like church trunk or treats and lots of things. And like at the end of Halloween, we have like a half a year's worth of candy.
Half a years, dude. we-
Dude,
we still have
bags,
the
like
single
pillowcases.
gallon bag. So first off, I guess two things. One, it depends on what culture you are. It's different cultures celebrate, Dia de los Muertos. Like there's different things that do have some religious aspect to it. Here in this country, I think, generally speaking, I'm not speaking for every culture, but it's this holiday to dress up and do different things. I think it means different things for different people. I think you sound like a giant grump and like a bah
Yeah.
humbug and
Yeah.
like a curmudgeon. Like,
Yeah.
I'm tired of these parties and these gatherings of people smiling and laughing and passing out candy and kids are coming to my door and ringing the doorbell. That ugh, gross, disgusting. I hate that. So you do sound there's an element of that.
Yeah.
But I don't recall your other questions. It's just I think
What are we celebrating? What are we
I was
celebrating
just
with
struck with
Halloween?
how grumpy you are, and I think it's like anything you celebrate it, and then half a year's worth of candy. That's actually shocking to me because we mandate that our children whittle down the. I mean, they get pounds and pounds. Like each of them, I think
Yeah,
we
it's
weighed
stupid.
it. I think it's like 5 to 10 pounds per kid.
It's so
It's
dumb.
ridiculous. We give it away, but we make them whittle it down to a gallon bag. Like they get 1 gallon bag, they can fill it,
Okay.
and then the rest goes other places. And my kids still have like half of their gallon bag of candy from last year. Like it's just so much. It's
Yeah.
disgusting. But that being said, I don't think that's really what we're going to talk about today, unless you have something meaningful to add to what Halloween is to you, because clearly it's an occasion to be a grump and a curmudgeon. Like, that's clearly what Halloween is to you.
I mean, it's just like I don't know, man. There's like you said, like there's tons of candy. Like who wants to get scared? I don't want to be scared. Like who likes
I mean, it's a whole
bloody,
industry, dude. People love being
gross
scared.
stuff?
Horror movies and
Yeah,
I
it's
mean, there's
just
a business aspect to it that's
I
very. I
know.
don't personally,
It's
but I
gross.
like scaring. I did it to my daughter yesterday. And I was dying laughing,
I'm
dying
sure she was
laughing.
laughing too.
She was. She started crying, but then she was laughing because she was crying. Like it was. She should not have been scared.
Mm.
She's reading a scary book for school. There's a sign. This book. She opened. She's like, "Dad, look at how creepy these pictures are." And so I'm standing behind her, and she opened it. And there's a picture. And when she opened it to the picture, I went, "Ah!" And she was like, she screamed and then she started crying. It was awesome. She shouldn't have been scared by that, but
Yeah.
it was a funny occasion. Anyhow, that's not what we're here to talk about. We lost all our listeners already.
Yeah.
And they've already signed off being like, wow, Stu is like a super grump. Like, why, how does he even have friends? And the answer to those inquiring minds out there is no, he does not. He has no friends except for me. I'm his only friend. So,
So let's talk about
great
giving.
intro.
Let's talk about giving. Let's talk about generosity.
Generosity. Yeah, so this is we're wrapping up Giving Month in the Kinetic Man, and I'll tell you that we say this every time, but some things came out this month for me that just like every month that were completely unexpected, and we'll get into that. But as we always like to start, let me give a couple definitions. So the definition of giving is to make a present of, to grant or bestow by formal action, to put into the possession of another for his or her use. I also felt it necessary to look up generous. And so the definition of generous it breaks it into two parts: of a person or of a thing. So generous of a person is showing a readiness to give more of something as money or time than is strictly necessary or expected, showing kindness towards others. and of a thing is larger or more plentiful than is usual or necessary. And the example was a generous sprinkle of pepper. But even when we started talking about that, when we started with generous of a thing and that it's larger, more plentiful than is usual or necessary, what first struck me was just my personal living situation, right? And is am I living in abundance in things that are larger or more plentiful? And maybe even to go back to the Halloween, issue, the larger, more plentiful than is usual or necessary when related to candy after Halloween. Like in all seriousness, what always strikes me is sad, but it's also fascinating and it's an indicator of just human nature. But we'll have tons of candy laid out on the floor, and the kids make their own piles, and then at some point they're trading whatever. But there's too much. There's too much candy to ever get through. There's more than it's a lifetime of candy essentially, and yet their selfishness comes out. Well, that's
Mm.
my candy. I'm like that, but there's 17 of that kinds, and you can't have all of those things. Is that like that's something to fight about? It's fascinating to me. But how often do we do that, right? How often is there a generous amount of how often is there a generous sprinkle of pepper in our lives? And we are potentially unwilling. We want to grab it. We don't want an open hand for it. We want to grab it and hold on to it. And it's just I think it's an interesting place to be, why definitions are so important, because it gives us a frame of reference to look and be like, where is there a generous sprinkle of pepper in my life? And is that good or bad? And I think it's just a worthwhile endeavor to dive into. You have something on that?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a heart posture for sure, and I think if you really dive into that, you could probably see a lot of challenge in our own hearts that are going in the wrong direction. I told this story in our group on one of our calls, and I saw it in my own heart posture over something so insignificant, so small. We were on fall break. We went to Moab, and we were like our family was at the pool swimming, and we brought our swimming bag with all of our like toys and goggles and gear and stuff like that. And my son had made some friends in the pool. He was throwing a football, like a little tiny little Nerf football, and it was time to go. It was time to go to dinner. I was like, "Hey, buddy, we need to go." And he was like, "Hey, can I give them this football because they don't have a ball to play with and they want to continue to play. Can I give them this football?" I was like, "No, buddy, that's our football. Like we
You
we
can
bought
only
that
get
football."
1,000 more of those on Amazon. So no,
Right. Yeah,
that's
like
right.
that's we it's like and it's coming apart too, dude. Like this like the string is coming apart. Like it's almost at throwaway condition as it is, but I was like, we play with that all the time, dude. Like we'll play with it tomorrow at the pool. Like, nah, don't give that away. He's like, "Oh, okay, but can I there's this other ball. There's this little like squishy baseball that's even smaller, and I think we got it for free." He's like, "Can I give that to them?" And again, heart posture was like, that's ours too. And I didn't want to give them that ball. And I was like, all right, yeah, you can give them that ball. And it's just like, oh, thinking back upon that, like, man, it's a freaking little Nerf ball, but it's
Dude.
mine. It's my Nerf ball.
It,
I don't
it's
want to
it's
give that
interesting,
away.
dude. It's all heart posture. And I'll tell you, so this when I was leaving the hotel um from my training last week, there was an opportunity to tip the room servers. And I won't get into the details of what it was, but I left I tipped an amount that in the moment I felt led to tip that amount, right? And it forced me, this month really informed it. And I even had an internal dialogue. And this is where I think these things are so critical, because we assess them from a different perspective. We try to live more intentionally. And I honestly, I was talking to myself and I said, I wonder how long I'll think about that. And my bet with myself was, and it was a significant, for me, a significant amount. And I said, I was having this internal conversation. I was like, I bet you, first off, I felt prompted by God to be generous. And so I wanted to be sensitive to that. And so I was. And and I even had a little debate like, are you saying that amount or are you saying like this amount, which is half? Or even saying even less, right? And I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this. And then after I just did it, I thought I was having another conversation with myself, and I was like, David, I bet you by the time you walk out of this hotel, you're not even gonna be thinking about that. Like it's not even gonna be a thing in your mind. In this moment, it seems potentially significant. I bet you really don't care. And I left, it's true. Like I hadn't thought about it until we're having this conversation right now, but it was more the point of that is not that I'm generous or anything like that. What the point is when do we sit back first off as believers, as Christians, do we sit back and say, God, what do you want of me in this moment? And if he blesses you with that still small voice and answer that you feel an inkling, do you honor it? Are you courageous enough to ask God, what do you want from me? And two, will you act on it? But also in a group of dudes like this that we have, it forces you into a much more profound place to analyze. If it wasn't for Giving Month, I doubt you would have had the analysis of the toys and all that
Yeah,
kind
I
of
would have
stuff.
never thought about it.
Right. And it's fascinating because you're one of the most generous people I know. When it comes to giving to others, you're a very generous individual. And so I think these things are important to dive into. And I think we need to surround ourselves with people that will challenge us in these ways. Like, hey, dude, I got to go back to the group and report back. Like, hey, this was a struggle I had. I didn't want to give away a free toy that we had
Yeah.
somehow gotten for the enjoyment of children. And by the way, I hate Halloween because I hate kids and America and family. Like those are the things you should commit to your that you should commit to being accountable for to your group.
You're making me sound
But
like a real butthead.
yeah, hey, I didn't do it. You started the podcast by making yourself sound like a butthead. But I think that's why we do definitions, right? Because when you go through the act of defining a word that you or a thing that you say is important to you, it forces a totally different level of awareness, intentionality, and context. And it challenges, it's really hard. If I tell you what I think generosity and giving is, you can counter that all day because it's coming from David and we have different opinions. When it comes from the dictionary, it's a little bit harder you can't really argue with the dictionary. You could potentially argue the point, whatever, but like the dictionary is not going to respond. Like you're there, you're a captive audience, and you're receiving what is what is generally and widely accepted to be a document that's way smarter than you are, right? Like that's why you reference a book like that. And so that's why we start there. And then we love to go to the identity of what a kinetic man is in the context of this topic. And so for us, kinetic men are intentional stewards of our time and our resources. We are generous. Like that's an emphatic statement. We are generous. It's not because we were born that way. It's not because we all that is a inherent part of our identity. It's because we choose to be identified as generous. Kinetic men know that the true measure of our values can easily be found in our calendars and our bank accounts, right? And so it goes beyond the definition and the perspective realm or even the hypothetical. It goes into like, no kidding. Okay, challenge it. What are the action steps that you take to challenge your generosity? Okay, it's easy. Like go to your calendar and see where you spend your time and your resources and go to your bank account. And it's very easy to see the transactions and where your money goes. And are you generous? And distill it from there, right? Like it's this isn't a debate. Like if you said, David, I'm Stuart and I am generous, I'd be like, awesome, cool. How do you define generous? All right, you define it and say it's money. Sweet. Like print out your bank accounts and let me see them. It's that easy, right? It's
Yeah.
facts. It's not it's your definition and are you living in accordance with the definition that you set for yourself in this topic? So why is this question, are you generous? Why is it so difficult? Like, why would you spend a month with a group of, 30 dudes on this topic of giving? Why is it so, why is it such a difficult thing to get our hands on? And I think there's really three primary reasons. One, it requires a working definition, right? Like you have to define what that means. It can't be a willy nilly. Like if you're really serious about it, It can't be like, wow, last month I think I gave, 2%, and that's better than the month before at 1%. And so I must be generous. No, no, like there's got to be a plan. You got to define it. There's got to be a plan. And second, like, you have to be self-aware. You have to make an honest assessment of yourself, right? And to be able to, and it requires effort and a willingness to be self-aware, no matter how unattractive the initial revelations may be for you. And third, a lot of folks struggle with, does this question even have a quantifiable answer? Or is generosity more of a feeling? And I'll tell you, we just had Eric Most come talk to our men's group. And dude, it's very quantified. There are some varsity level strategies and tactics involved if you're truly serious about being generous. Like, there's no feelings about it. It's like, here's hard math.
Yeah.
How do you maximize that? Right. And so I think those three areas are areas where we're really like, huh, I gotta dive in.
Yeah, something that I think was pretty hard hitting for all of us in the group. You had posted a YouTube video in our chat about the Bema Judgment Seat of Christ, and I watched it like two or three times. And as believers, like you profess your faith in Jesus, and you are saved, and you have eternal well-being in heaven. But then, like, what's next, right? Like, you're saved, but what's next? And then there comes this judgment of like, all right, what'd you do? What'd you do with the rest of your life with the God-given resources that were given to you? Like, how did you use those? How did you steward them well, like I've asked you to do? And that's where like you kind of dive into like, oh, what have I done? What am I doing? What are even my God-given resources? Right? And there's where that self-awareness piece comes in to understand who am I? Who is Stuart Grazier? Who is David Gutierrez? What has God given me as a resource, with the treasures that I have here in life? And like, how am I doing good with those? Like, how am I stewarding those well? And you can then take that and like really dive in and pour into like what he has called you to do in your life. It's a pretty powerful thought exercise.
Yeah, dude. And it's like, I mean, again, you have to assess it by what's important to you, right? And so for us, my faith is paramount, is paramount. That's the number one thing. And if you really say that and you acknowledge, all right, well, I'm going to be accountable. I'm going to be accountable. And how am I going to account for these things? Are there gaps? And what can I do about it? Right? What can I do about it? And am I even concerned that there's gaps? And so I love that the Bema mindset, or the Bema uh judgment seat. It forces you to think differently about what these things are. Look, a lot of us will say, well, I want to hear, job well done, my good and faithful servant. All right, cool. Like, that's awesome. What does that mean? And I'll tell you, so we had a breakout, and we went into some smaller groups, and the conversation we had um in my small group that I loved is that question. And it doesn't matter if you're coming from a place of faith. I mean, it matters if you're coming from a place of faith, but it doesn't really, when you're assessing these things, if you say giving and generosity is important to you, it doesn't necessarily matter the context by which you analyze it or assess it. It just matters that you do, and that you have some kind of framework. And for us, our framework happens to be, our faith in Jesus. But even if that's not the framework you use, I think it's still a similar process. And what I mean by that is, when you look at, okay, how am I using the resources that I've been given? Am I truly generous? Because what are my resources, right? And do I give of them? Even going back to a secular definition, it's it's showing a readiness to give more of something as money or time than is strictly necessarily expected, showing kindness towards others, right? So in that, do I have money or time? Like, what are the resources? And that forced us into a conversation around, hey, do you even know? And this is the question I posed to the group. I said, hey, if I asked you guys to go around and tell me how God has blessed you, what your talents are, what your resources are, what you're awesome at, and I told you to do it right now, and you had to give me three, the top three. Could you do it? And all the dudes in there, and myself included, were like, it'd be really hard. There'd be a lot of hemming and hawing, and I might be embarrassed. And there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of barriers to knowing that. So, okay, well, let's play the opposite side of that coin. If I asked you guys to tell me all the ways you're terrible, how easy would that be? And everyone, like all of us, are like, dude, that'd be. I would take. There'd have to be a 4 hour Zoom call to just go through me and all the things that I'm terrible at. Right? I was like, yeah, isn't that interesting? So if that's true for most of us, how do you assess what your resources are if we're so unwilling or uncomfortable to dive into what we're awesome at and how God has blessed us? And it was really a moment for all of us to reflect and just be like, man, I could truly be way more generous by acknowledging how I've been blessed in the ways that I'm awesome. And it's not just money. I think that's where we get wrapped up. We get lost. So I give my 10%, I give my 20, I'm a 50%, like whatever it is, we get lost in that. But if we don't acknowledge, say we're like really gifted to teach, or say we're encouragers, or we're super blessed with administration, like these different things, and all biblical things too. And if I never spend time in that gift teaching others, I'm also equally ungenerous in how I've been blessed and how I've been gifted. And so it's a really powerful point. We talk about self awareness. How powerful would it be to completely acknowledge and develop and spend time in your strengths and know that those are your strengths, and then give from those resources as well? If I know I'm an encourager and I withhold words of encouragement because of discomfort or whatever, then I'm not truly giving of the resources that I've been given in abundance, right? My talents are being buried in the ground. They're not being invested in others. And what a travesty that is, right? Who's not being blessed? It's almost like receiving gifts. I had a conversation recently. I'm like, hey, let them give you the thing that they're trying to give you, and just be grateful and say thank you. Because by denying it, you're not allowing them to bless you or live in their blessing that truly makes them happy to do this thing. And you, with this false whatever, are not allowing them to express it because why? Answer that question. Why? Like why won't you allow them to live in their blessing? And equally, if you're so hesitant to allow them to do it, what blessings are you not living in? What are you not giving up? Right? Not giving up. That's the right word. It's not sacrifice. What are you not giving from the abundance of the gifting that you've been given?
Yeah, man. We, like you said, we had just had a conversation with Eric Most, president of National Christian Foundation here in Colorado, and he had said something I thought was pretty interesting. You were talking about finances, and he said he likes to say, and this is kind of his saying, so we'll give him credit for it. But he says I like to tell people to steward their life, and he breaks life down into labor, influence, finances, and expertise. And he says that finances are that's kind of the easy answer, right? Like that's what where most of us go straight to when we're thinking about giving, being generous. And for the most part, in a world view, like we're pretty good. And by pretty good, we're on average, the United States, what do you say, gives about 3% of
Yeah,
their
3%.
income.
Yep.
3% of their income is doing pretty good for from a world standard, which I also thought was pretty interesting. But these other aspects of labor, influence, and expertise, like I don't think many people think about that very much. Maybe labor, maybe like the work that they do is giving, but how about influence and how about expertise? You know, your influence. Are you using a podcast? Are you using your network? Are you using a platform? Even social media could be, I mean, used in a good way to steward your life well. Your expertise, your knowledge. Like, what do you know? Another thing that we talked about is your story. Like your story, your failures, your faults, your um time of going into the ditch, right? Like, and then figuring out how to get out of that ditch. Your story, if told, like that could be a saving grace to somebody else. How could you use that in a generous way to help other people? There's way more to generosity and giving than just giving your 3% of your money to your church or whatever you decide to give it to.
Well, yeah, and I would argue that you highlighted it. You said the easy button is finances. I I just and I'm even thinking about the LIFE, and as you were talking about that one, I was very actively listening. I wasn't trying to play my response in my head, but I kind of was playing my response in my head. It took me to a place of like, could I list my life stuff,
Mm,
right? Could I list the things that I could offer, and then how powerful would it be to intentionally take those things and use them, right? Like that's the exercise. Is not only the self-awareness is great. It's awesome to be able to identify, like to get to a place in your life where I'm like, hey man, I'm God has blessed me to. I'll tell you, it's very empowering to be able to say God has blessed me to be an encourager, and He's blessed me with the ability to build teams and pour into others from a leadership perspective, and to say, to list out the things, and then however long it takes you to do the work to get to that place, and then be like, okay, so what? So what is important? Well, it's important to me to invest in my family and my life there. It's important to me to invest in my community, and it's important for me to build a successful business that looks like whatever. All right, cool. Like take those strengths and apply those to those things, and dude, it's like jet fuel, right?
yeah.
It's jet fuel, and really, I've been I got challenged on this recently. I can't remember the context of the conversation, but and I'll stick with this. This is my perspective, my view, but I honestly don't believe in like spending a lot of time on my weaknesses. Like I know that it
Mm,
sounds awesome. I think it sounds awesome to be like, yeah, I really stink at this area, so I'm just gonna like I really want to pour in this year and get strong here. And I'm not a big believer in that. Like I believe that you should pour into your strengths. Like what if you could maximize your strength? You acknowledge your strengths and you just pour into that. Pour all your resource into like getting super super efficient and super proficient in the areas that you're gifted. Like and someone recently was like, well dude, but that's not that principle, that's so you just never want to work on, you don't want to acknowledge your weaknesses. I'm like, no, no, no. I believe in acknowledging your weaknesses 100%. Like I believe that you should have a list of your weaknesses, your strengths. I just don't believe in investing in those things, right? And again, no matter how you feel in that, put that aside. If you knew your strengths and you were able to be generous in them, is that not a very powerful place to be? And also a humble place to be, but also like you are a contributor at that point.
yeah.
You are contributing to somebody's life at that point, right? And I think that it's just I hate seeing, or it makes me sad to see so much potential wasted because we don't even know we haven't spent any time to even know what those things are. And that's really where I think we could maximize our generosity. Maybe it looks like you being a coach for your kids' team, right? Maybe it looks like, and if you think about something like that, you're like, oh, but that's not really, oh, dude, anybody who's ever played athletics as a kid, do you remember your coaches from your youth?
Yeah.
Hugely impactful and influential people in
Huge
your
impact.
life, right? Good and bad. So I think when we start assessing, like you ask one follow on question in these areas, we can really get to a deep place of, all right, what does generosity truly look like? And then that Bema mindset, or I'm sorry, I keep saying mindset. It's one of the C12 core values that I had to memorize. The judgment seat of Christ. When you look at that, a lot of the question, playing that out, and I believe that it's going to be this way. God's not just going to say, "What'd you do with the money I gave you?" If that's a resource that He blessed you with in abundance, yes, that's going to be part of it. But there's a lot of other things that I think we're gonna have to account for, right? Like for me, he's gonna be like, dude, I made you like super good looking. Like, what did you do with that?
No, he didn't. No,
You know
he's
what
not
I
gonna say
mean?
that.
Like I made you really smart.
Mm,
I'm like struggling
probably
with
not.
really smart and articulate. I'm struggling even with words to
I
get
was
out.
gonna ask you. I was gonna ask you like when, like you did this mental thought exercise of going through like your strengths and weaknesses. Like, there must have been like a lot of weaknesses and like maybe one or two strengths. Is there? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's us as humans, like most of us that can acknowledge the few strengths and the many weaknesses we have, we're called, self-aware, potentially humble. We're not sociopaths, basically. And so those of us that are delusional is another one, like delusional, uh which I would potentially apply that to you, on
Uh,
these gifts that you believe that you have.
mm.
That's a thing too, right? Delusion, denial, all these things are powerful factors that keep us from living our highest and best.
Something else kind of came to mind, through this month and just diving, deeper in to this topic, having these intentional, deep conversations is kind of goes back to that heart posture, but it starts to allow you to look at the world through a different lens and look at the world through the lens of a giver. And as soon as you start doing that, man, the opportunities are in abundance. Like there's so many opportunities to live with a heart of generosity just in everyday life. And as soon as you start looking through that lens of a giver, man, there's just so much joy in that. Like there's so much joy in serving and giving to other people with the capacity, with the abundance that God gave you. And it could just be the smallest of things, right? Just a smile or saying hello or talking to somebody, or if just asking how their day is, and if they say something that sparks an area where you could kind of pour into. Like there's so much joy in that, and it really is a huge difference maker when you can live your life looking through that lens, seeing the world through that lens, and just like jumping on opportunities as a giver when it comes up. It's pretty cool. I know you've had some experiences this month, in that, just interacting with people on a regular basis and just saying hello and asking how people's days are. Um, and I had an experience again. It was so simple. Like I was at the post office, and it was early in the morning, and I just like asked her how her day was, and you could just tell she was kind of grumpy, and she's like, "Oh, I haven't had my coffee yet, and it's not starting out to be the great day, and I forgot my coffee at home and left my water bottle, and all these like things of not making her day really well." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and I left, and I was like, "Hey, I should go get her coffee." Went across the street to Starbucks, got her a little, $5 coffee, brought it back, and dude, it was like the biggest thing that could happen to her that day. Like just the smile on her face was just bigger than life. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're an angel. Like this is the best day ever. Thank you so much." It just made her day. It was a $6 coffee just based off of me asking her a simple question of how you're going, how your day's going.
Well, and did you tell her in the moment that, well, I'm not an angel. Me and my business partner are angels because I actually use the business credit card. Like it, did you did you tell her that, or
I
did you
did
not come clean on?
I didn't say any of that. No.
No, I love that. I love that story because it requires, there's an exercise that we went through last week, and it can get frustrating, but it really forces it was pretty fascinating. And the rules were, the first word out of your mouth after somebody speaks has to start with the last letter of the word spoken to you. Does that make sense? So
Yep.
really the rule forces you to listen really, really well.
Mm,
So like in that context, if I stopped it well,
that's
then
hard.
you would have to start with,
Love you.
an L. Love you, David. You're the best person. You're the best friend I've ever even conceived of. Like things that would come from your heart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But it,
yeah.
but it was interesting that exercise. It was really interesting because it also highlights how often it forces you. One, it's you're not going to immediately respond because you no longer are in your mind thinking about your response while somebody's talking. You're
Yeah.
listening to them, and it forces you to it causes a natural break in the conversation because you're processing, what did they just say, what was the last word they actually said, and now I'm responding. Um but it's truly hearing what somebody says. And what I love about the story you just told is that you are asking a question, but you were really listening. And then there was an action in that you could do that was very small, right? Like one thing that I've been doing a lot more of lately, and I didn't necessarily characterize it as generosity, and there was no ulterior motive to be more giving in this. Just this conversation challenged me. And one thing I'll say a lot is, hey man, I'll be praying for you and your family. Well,
Yeah.
instead of doing that, like if it's usually about via text, I'll just call them and be like, hey, I was gonna text you. I want to pray. Why don't we can I just pray for you? Like just pray
Mm.
for you real quick. And dude, it's been awesome because one, I'm actually following. I don't know if you're anything like me, but a lot of times I'm like, I'm gonna pray for you, and then dude, I'll just be honest with
Then
you,
just
like
don't.
I'll probably forget.
Yeah.
But if you do it in the moment, one, you are praying for them, but they also get the blessing of that prayer and those, or like a lot of people, if they're uncomfortable with prayer, they'll be like, oh, I'll be sending you good thoughts or whatever, like whatever that I don't know. That's not something I do, but when they say it, but why not just call and be like, hey, you know what? I'm just here. I just want to say these words of encouragement to you. It's so small from an effort perspective. And if you're saying you're doing it anyways, just do it. But it also, that's a way that you bless somebody, right? Like you can be generous with your time, your words, your effort in that moment, and just do it. And I'll tell you, dude, I've never to this day, I just have never had anybody, I'll be like, hey, can I pray with you real quick? Can I pray for you? And they're like, no, no,
No, I'm
you
good, man.
can't.
Nah.
No, I'm good. Like, no, no, thank you.
No need.
I'm not,
No
and,
need for
and I'm not
prayers here.
saying that it will never happen because not everybody I pray for are Christians or people from church,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they all are like, man, thank you, that'd be great. And it's really, again, it's not a fake thing. It's I'm legitimately praying for this person because I said that I would, but just do it there in the moment. And I think with a barrier to that, oftentimes is a perceived effort. It's so easy to text things now and just be like, hey, I'm thinking about you, whatever. Well, instead of like when I think about somebody now, a lot of times I'll just call them. I'll be like,
Well,
and a lot of times they don't answer. They don't
there's some
answer.
vulnerability in that too, man. There's some
Yeah.
vulnerability in that because like now you actually have to like say some legit prayers and come up with something to bless them instead of just, texting, I'll pray for you and then never do. There's
Well,
no
it's a heart
accountability in
posture.
that.
It truly is. Are you true? Do you truly have a desire? Why are you saying I want to pray for you?
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to the self-awareness thing. Like, am I trying to appear more godly? Am I trying to appear spiritual? Am I trying to like, why am I telling you I'm going to pray for you? And if I am telling you that, or anything, right? Like um, our word is so it's just been diminished. It's gotten cheaper. I'll do that thing, and you don't do that thing. You don't show up. I'll whatever. I'll be there, and you're not there. It's. I was hearing a story last week about there's this fine structure, right? It's an accountability group, and there's a fine structure. You don't do this, there's a fine.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
they were talking about this dude, older gentleman, and it kind of when you set things up like that, it kind of could be a joke and like, I'm just gonna give my money now because I'm not gonna do it.
Mm.
And that happened in front of this guy. And dude, talk about bring it. That guy, so someone did that. Yeah, I'm just gonna pay him $100 fine now. And that dude said, "Oh, that's interesting. So your word is only worth $100." And it was like
Wow.
record stop, like the joke, it wasn't funny anymore.
Yeah,
But
right.
that guy held the sanctity of the accountability in that group so high that he challenged that individual, like, okay, cool. So your word is only worth $100. Interesting. Thank you. Next. And
Mic
it like
drop.
hits the brakes, dude, right? It hits the
Yeah.
brakes. But how often do we do that? What's my word really worth? Especially in the spiritual context. I'm going to pray for you. Like prayer is a serious thing. It should be a
Yeah.
serious thing. It's talking to God. And so if I'm not really willing to do it, I should never text it. And that goes with a lot of things we say, right? And that's, again, it's antithetical to generosity because if you do follow up with the things, it can be so meaningful, whatever it is, right? And the how are yous. When you ask somebody, what I love about your story, to go back to that, how many times do people say, how are you? And then their ears shut.
Yeah. Stop listening.
Oh, yeah, me too. Good. You? Good. You? Right. And when you asked the question, you were engaged, you listened. Oh, I forgot my coffee. Oh, I hear that. Okay. I could do something about that. Right now, I could do something about that. Dude, it's so tiny, man. So tiny.
Yeah.
But it's not tiny, it's actually huge. Because she's going to remember that moment, that little cup of coffee that you got, that we got. I should,
That's right. That
that
you
we got.
participated in
Yeah,
that
yeah,
financially.
yeah. But that cup of coffee that you got, that will be a thing she remembers forever. And I believe that little thing will also be credited to you in heaven.
Yeah. Well, it can also be a spark, man. It could also be a spark. It could be the candle that's lit, in her world. For her to go turn around and do it to somebody else. Who knows? I mean, I'll never know. I'll never know how that impacted her day. I'll never know like what then she did to give and be generous to others. Don't know.
But back to that Bema seat, I think that aspect of it was the most, I think was probably one I'd
Mm.
never considered,
Yeah.
but it was in the context of sharing the gospel and living your faith and helping others to find their faith. And it was the part of, hey, I poured into you, and then it played out like this person then poured into this person, this person, this person, this person, and those people all poured out, and that continued. Like that literally can be a generational thing, and it can impact millions. And
Yeah.
in that video, those millions were credited to him, right? It was just a cool, it was a mind, like it was like, oh dang. The interactions we have, the words we say, and the way we treat people really, really matter, dude.
For
And
sure.
it goes beyond a lot of times finances. Nobody sees that, and I think it's important to give finance. Like I think that's an important expression of our faith. But if you really look at the Bible, it's the minimum requirement, right? Like the
Yeah.
10%, the tithe is just a minimum requirement. So I think it's important, but I also think like doing living out of your gifts is oftentimes even more impactful
Yeah.
than just giving money, right?
Takes
But
a
you
lot
have
more
to
effort
know
for
your
sure.
gifts. You have to know your gifts. And if you're an encourager by nature, I think I keep going back to that because I think I'm an encourager,
Eh, eh.
dude. Like, how 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 many opportunities throughout the day do you have to encourage somebody, dude? Like, I mean, there's literally tons of times you can just give a word of encouragement to build somebody up,
I mean,
and it
we've
costs
spent pretty
nothing.
much the entire day together. I don't feel like I've gotten any type of encouragement from you today.
Um, yeah, I mean, you're probably right because sometimes it's more challenging to give encouragement than others because sometimes disgust overpowers encouragement. I'm sorry, I love you so much. I said I thought what you did with the giving was so
No,
meaningful and
you did.
inspirational to me, but you
You did.
don't hear it because your ears are blinded. That doesn't make any sense.
David,
Yes, sir, Stuart.
you're a fanatic, crazy, lovable teddy bear of encouragement.
Wow. Thank you for that, Stuart. I'm trying to dig the sweetness from that. I like it. It's good. Appreciate you. So, what do we do about this? What do
I
we
was
what do
I was
you
listening for
what
the
do you
last
do?
letter of the word that you just said, but
Yeah, it's hard. If we did an
That is
entire
hard.
podcast, that'd be like the longest podcast ever because you're like, oh
Lots of
no,
awkward
a lot of
silence.
awkward silence.
What do we do with this, David? What do we do with this?
Yeah, man, I think there's a couple practical, easy practical steps, and a lot of it. I mean, I had this conversation with my daughter the other day. She was having some struggles, and I said, I think what would be good, and I asked her, I was asking more questions than giving advice, but one of the things I did tell her, I said, I think it would be really good to give yourself an opportunity to sit in silence.
Hmm.
Like put the phone away, get a journal out, and like explore explore these feelings, explore these topics, and and be intentional with your time. Spend time in them. And I think the same with this, right? I think the things we talked about, those three specific areas of giving and some of the barriers to realizing our own generosity is spend some time, like shut the phone off, pick a time, and just start with 5 minutes, whatever, something simple. And no kidding, like the prompt for that first session is how have I been blessed? Or what am I good at? And just see what happens, right? Just see it as you start creating this list with the intent of tying actions to those areas. Man, it could be pretty magical, right?
Yeah.
It could be pretty
Maybe use
magical.
maybe use LIFE. You know, what do I do for
LIFE.
labor? What influence do I have? What do I have for finances? What do I have for expertise?
Yeah. And we use something um we use something similar as we do that exercise. And we have in the workbook, we have a excuse me, we have an exercise where we walk through this process, and no kidding, it comes out to a statement, right? We have them write a statement like, this is who I am, these are my strengths, my resources, and this is how I commit to being generous with the way that God's blessed me, whatever. Those are not the exact words, but the point is that you come out of it with a clearly defined statement or vision or mission, whatever it is, where you can tie actions, you could tie very very practical things back to things that are a little more fluffy, right? A little more they're harder to get at, like I am really good at statements, or I have been blessed with, or these are my talents type statements. But from that, well, you can draw a lot of, I mean, just from one of those strengths, you could probably draw tons of actions in the way that you serve others.
Good stuff, dude.
Yeah, dude. Hey, stop being such a grump, man. Stop being such a grump. Okay. When the kids
I'm
come and want
I'm not gonna be a
candy,
grump.
just be generous with
Okay,
your
lots of
smiles and be
candy.
like, here you go, kid. Here you go. I like the circular approach. Like the kids
Mm.
bring all the can our my kids bring all the candy that they go collect.
Hmm.
I then reach into their bag and pass it out to the kids that are coming by. I love that approach.
Regifting. You're regifting.
Regifting 8 pounds of
Are you?
candy.
I remember you mentioning you wanted a gorilla suit. Did you get the gorilla suit? Are you gonna
I
be a
didn't,
gorilla?
man. I
Mm,
didn't. No,
that's
I'm still
unfortunate.
rocking I have a pretty amazing elf
Hmm.
elf costume. So
Okay.
I've been rocking that.
Do you have spandex? Do you have green spandex?
They're yellow,
Oh,
but
that's yellow.
like
Yellow.
there's
Hmm.
a there's the wig and the yeah, it's pretty sweet.
That's awesome.
It's pretty sweet.
All right, dude. Good conversation. Let's
Yeah,
all be
buddy.
better givers.
Let's go give of our abundance. Let's go give our gifts. Bless others. Peace out.
See ya.
Yep.